Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is Lorraine, Alternative Homesteading. It's Saturday, May 13, 2023, approximately 5:15 p.m. And I'm finally getting to recording this testimony or affidavit. But before I get into it, because it is quite long, please hit the thumbs up, like, comment, share. And this will be a long document. I'm not sure if I can get through the whole thing, but I will read as much as I can, and I will post a link to it in the description center. So this is the Declaration of Samuel Robinson. It's a PDF form, and I'll read it to you. I, Samuel P. Robinson, hereby declare as follows, pursuant to 28 U.S.C. Section 1746. 1. I am a supervisory special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, and the Associate Deputy Director for Operations of the Terrorist Screening Terrorist Screening Center, TSC. I became Associate Deputy Director for Operations at TSC in September 2021. I have been acting Deputy Director for Operations of the TSC since May 1, 2023. I have been with the FBI since 2004 and have served in a variety of criminal investigative, counterterrorism, counterintelligence, and management positions. In my capacity as acting Deputy Director for Operations of the TSC, I supervise 8 units and approximately 400 individuals, including both government employees and contractors. I am responsible for the overall operations of the TSC, including maintaining the terrorist screening database, the TSDS, which is the federal government's consolidated terrorist watch list, managing encounters, and sharing intelligence with domestic and foreign partners. 2. I submit this declaration in support of the government's opposition. Okay, this is the government's opposition to the plaintiff's motion to compel limited discovery against defendant FBI and Targeted Justice Inc. et al. Versus Garland 4:23-CV-01013. And in parentheses, it's SD Texas Houston Division. So I understand the plaintiffs seek disclosure of information pertaining to their TSDS status or lack thereof, including their dates of inclusion, if any. The purpose of this declaration is to assert the law enforcement privilege over information pertaining to any individual's TSDS status or lack thereof, and to explain why disclosure of such information would cause harm to national security and law enforcement interests in the United States. This assertion of privilege does not mean any of the plaintiffs are included in the TSDS, as they allege. Rather, I explain below why disclosure of information about who is or who is not included in the TSDS is properly protected under the law enforcement privilege. 3. The matters stated herein are based on my personal knowledge, my background, training, and experience relating to terrorist watch listing and counterterrorism investigations, and my review and consideration of information available to me in my official capacity, including information furnished by the FBI and TSC personnel in the course of their official activities. My conclusions have been reached in accordance therewith. And then there is a subheading, Overview of the Consolidated United States Terrorist Watch List. So this is number 4. The TSDS is the federal government's consolidated terrorist watch list. The TSDS, in general, contains names and other identifying information For example, dates of birth, photographs, iris scans. Did you hear that? Iris scans. How do they get that? They've got to be really up close, huh? And fingerprints of individuals known or reasonably suspected to be or have been engaged in conduct constituting in preparation for, in aid or in furtherance of, or related to terrorism and or terrorist activities. I just want to say for the record, folks, that I won't interject anymore. They have not defined here what terrorist activities are. Okay, I've read this now. This is my second time. I have not read what a terrorist activity actually is. Okay, so the individuals are either known or reasonably suspected to be or have been engaged in conduct constituting in preparation for, in aid or in furtherance of, or related to terrorism and or terrorist activities. The TSDS does not contain the underlying classified intelligence or other derogatory information that is the basis for the individual's inclusion in the database. Segregating the identified information in this way facilitates information sharing among United States government watch listing and screening agencies. And now I'm only on page 2, folks. I'm going on to page 3 next. Number 5, nonetheless, much of the information that TSDS is derived from classified or other legally restricted information. As a result, disclosure of TSDS information for any purpose other than an authorized watch listing function must be approved by the originator of the underlying information. Well, that's interesting, huh, folks? So number 6, the TSDS was created and is maintained by TSC, a federal multi-agency center administered by the FBI. The FBI is the agency responsible for submitting nominations of individuals suspected of links to domestic terrorism for inclusion in the TSDS. So there you go, folks. Those are the villains. The National Counterterrorism Center, NCTC, is the agency responsible for submitting nominations of individuals suspected of links to international terrorism for inclusion in the TSDS and serves as the central agency for gathering and analyzing all intelligence obtained by the U.S. government pertaining to international terrorism. Okay, so there's a delineation. So one is for domestic terrorism and one is for international terrorism. Number 7. Upon receipt of this identity information, the TSC reviews the nominations received from the FBI and or NCTC, as well as the underlying derogatory, that's an unusual word to use, the underlying derogatory information maintained by those entities and information from other sources to determine whether an individual meets the criteria for inclusion in the TSDS. Inclusion in the TSDS generally requires a determination that there is a reasonable suspicion that the individual is engaged, has been engaged, or intends to engage in conduct constituting in preparation for, an aid in furtherance of, or related to terrorism and or terrorist activities. We still have not defined what a terrorist activity is, folks. Let's continue. That determination must be based on articulable intelligence or information taken together with any rational inferences. Oh, that's a very dangerous word, folks. Rational inferences. An inference is not a fact. Okay? This is somebody's subjective perspective. So, taken together with any rational inferences that can be drawn from the intelligence or information, the determination must consider the totality of the circumstances. The TSDS also includes identifying information of some individuals who do not meet the reasonable suspicion standard, but only for the limited purpose of supporting specific screening functions of the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of State, such as determining eligibility for immigration to the United States, and which are exported to those agencies only for those purposes. So in other words, these individuals are not considered, quote, known or suspected terrorists, and are not screened as such. As a result, any U.S. person who is in the TSDS pursuant to an exception to the reasonable suspicion standard would not generally be subjected to heightened aviation security screening at airports. In order to maintain the effectiveness of these special screening functions, details regarding the method at which individuals are identified for watch listing exceptions must not be disclosed and are properly categorized as law enforcement sensitive. Number 9. The TSDS includes subset categories of known or suspected terrorists who may be subject to the additional security screening before being permitted to board an aircraft, or who are prohibited from boarding flights in the U.S. carriers, as well as flights into, out of, over, or within U.S. airspace. These categories are commonly referred to as the selectee, expanded selectee, and no-fly lists, and are used by the TSA to secure commercial air travel against the threat of terrorism. You know, I'm just saying that worked really well on 9/11, don't you think? Oh, I said I wasn't going to interject anything. I'm sorry, folks. I just can't help myself. Individuals may be required to undergo additional security screening for reasons other than a match against TSDS record. For example, passengers may be designated for additional security screening by virtue of random selection, so that you can be selected randomly for these additional searches. And number 10. The selectee list contains individuals who may be subject to additional security screening before being permitted to board an aircraft. The TSC places individuals on the selectee list if it determines that they meet the reasonable suspicion standard applicable to known or suspected terrorists and also satisfy additional specific criteria. They don't tell you what the specific criteria is. For security reasons, the criteria for inclusion on the selectee list are not public. There you go, folks. It's just another secret list. Another secret set of criteria. This is because disclosure of the selectee criteria could give the known suspected terrorist information that may assist in developing strategies to circumvent security screening. Additionally, in some instances, disclosing the criteria for inclusion in the selectee list might provide an individual who believes that he's on the selectee list enough additional information to deduce the nature or content of the underlying derogatory information the intelligence community has collected on him. That's a very interesting word that is continued to be used throughout. Additional derogatory information. Maybe I'll just do a whole video on the word derogatory, folks. We'll have to clear this up. This additional context would allow the individual to identify the nature of investigative interest in him and to alter his behavior, destroy evidence, take new precautions against surveillance, and change the level of any terrorism-related activity in which he or she is engaged. The expanded selectee list consists of individuals who meet the reasonable suspicion standard for TSDS inclusion and for whom the TSDS record contains a full name and a full date of birth. So that is full identifying information. Number 12. The no-fly list consists of individuals who are prohibited from boarding flights on U.S. carriers as well as flights into, out of, over, or within the U.S. airspace. In order to include an individual in no-fly list, the TSC must determine that in addition to meeting the reasonable suspicion standard, the individual poses at least one of the following: a threat of committing an act of international terrorism as defined in 18 U.S.C. section 22331, or domestic terrorism as defined in 18 U.S.C. 2335, with respect to an aircraft, including a threat of air piracy or a threat to airline, passenger, or civil aviation security, a threat of committing an act of domestic terrorism as defined in 18 U.S.C. 2335, with respect to homeland, a threat of committing an act of international terrorism, 18 U.S.C. 2331, against any U.S. government facility abroad, and associated or supported personnel, including U.S. embassies, consulates, missionaries, military installations, defined in 10 U.S.C. section 2801C4, U.S. ships, U.S. aircraft, and other military craft owned or leased by the U.S. government. Or D, a threat of engaging in or conducting a violent act of terrorism, or who is operationally capable. Where to go? Or is operationally capable of doing so. Individuals on the no-fly list are prohibited from boarding U.S. commercial aircraft and from flying out into over the United States airspace. Number 13. Several federal agencies use information from the TSDS for a variety of national security and law enforcement screening and vetting purposes. For example, U.S. Customs and Border Protection receives information from the TSDS and may rely on that information when inspecting individuals at U.S. ports of entry. The Transportational Security Administration, which is the TSA, also uses information in the TSDS in implementing aviation security procedures. 14. The TSC and the nominating agency seek to ensure the continuing accuracy of the information in the TSDS. An intelligence or law enforcement agency that nominated an individual to the TSDS because of suspected ties to international terrorism is expected to promptly notify the NCTC of any information that might require modification or detection of an individual from the TSDS, and the NCTC must then be transmitted that information to the TSC. The FBI is likewise required to promptly notify TSC if it receives information suggesting the need to notify or delete or a record from the TSDS with respect to an individual's suspected links to domestic terrorism. In addition, records in the TSDS are regularly reviewed to verify that there is adequate support for continued inclusion in the database. So you need to be renewed. More information. They have to gather more and more information in order to continue you in the database. Without current, reliable, and accurate information in the TSDS, the purpose of sharing information in order to protect national security of the United States would be defeated. 15. The overview of the United States government watch listing process and procedures, which is an overview document, ECF number 41-1, contains additional information about the process for nomination of individuals to the TSDS, use of that TSDS information by domestic agencies, quality assurance measures that ensure that the information in the TSDS is thorough, accurate, and current, and the available process for redress requests. In the result of a lengthy interagency process to publicly disclose so much information in the U.S. government terrorism watch listing process and procedures as the watch listing community determined could be made public without compromising national security and law enforcement interests. The overview document was prepared for the purpose of more fully and clearly informing the public of watch listing processes. Now we're going to get on to this next little portion. Now I'm on page 7. Assertion of privilege over TSDS status information. Number 16. I submit this declaration to assert and support a claim of law enforcement privilege over information that would disclose or tend to disclose TSDS status, that is, whether any individual is or is not included in the TSDS. Number 17. As discussed more fully below, TSDS status information is highly sensitive, treated as law enforcement sensitive, and is subject to the law enforcement privilege, as disclosure of such information could reasonably be expected to risk circumvention of the law and to cause harm to law enforcement and counterterrorism investigations. In the following paragraphs, I will explain why an individual's TSDS status, other than that disclosed through the from the Department of Homeland Security TRIP process, should not be disclosed. So you can see here they're going through great lengths to prevent disclosure of this information in any way, shape, or form. 18. It is the general policy of the U.S. government not to disclose any individual's status in the TSDS or a subset beyond the limited disclosures contemplated by the DHS TRIP procedures for U.S. persons who are denied boarding because of their presence on the no-fly list. So this is really the only way that you'll know. If you're on a do-not-fly list, you will know that you have been placed on some kind of a list. This policy protects the national security of the United States. Number 19. The TSDS information comes from sensitive law enforcement and national security investigations in classified or sensitive sources and methods, and individuals included in the TSDS can be subjects or persons of interest in ongoing law enforcement or national security investigations or intelligence gathering. Right, folks? Intelligence gathering. Like, when they break into your house and steal things and move things around. They want to see what you're doing at home, what you eat, what you drink, what you throw out in the garbage pail. Go into your dirty laundry. Number 20. Disclosure of an individual's TSDS status outside of the DHS TRIP process could reasonably be expected to risk circumvention of the law and cause harm to law enforcement and national security investigations. More specifically, disclosure of this information would facilitate terrorists and terrorist groups in their operations and planning by assisting them in determining which of their potential operatives are listed in the TSDS and which are not. Additionally, such knowledge could compromise ongoing counterterrorism investigation by, for example, giving members of terrorist groups the opportunity to gauge whether a particular individual is the subject of counterterrorism, intelligence, or investigative interest, causing the person to alter his or her behavior, destroy evidence, take new precautions against surveillance, or change the level of terrorism-related activity in which he or she is engaged. Terrorists would then be able to leverage the information to ensure their activities go undetected. So actually, folks, I'm going to stop here because I'm on page 8. I'm getting a little tired right now, and I might continue reading this, but what I might more than likely will do is place the link in the description so you can continue reading, starting page 8, number 20, or actually number 21. So I hope you enjoy this. Got some information about this affidavit declaration written by Samuel Robinson. He's an FBI agent since 2004. So once again, folks, please hit the thumbs up button, like and comment and share. I look forward to conversation on this topic, especially after you've completed reading the last several pages